Okay, so welcome back to the channel for another superbike review. Today we're going to be taking a look at this. It's a 2004 Yamaha YZF R1 5VY. The R1 is Yamaha's long-time running flagship superbike and has been with us now for almost 25 years. The very first iteration R1 broke cover in 1998 and instantly made big waves on the superbike scene. It brought with it several unique features such as the stacked gearbox, which made the inline-4 engine be more compact than ever before, making a claimed 150 brake horsepower and a top speed of 170 miles an hour. The original R1 made no bones about putting a stamp of authority on the road and on the track. In 2000, a tweaked version of that original R1 was released. Although it shared a lot of similarities to the 1998 model, Yamaha did identify some key areas for improvement. The biggest changes on that bike really came to the internals of the engine. It now housed lighter cams, improvements to the transmission, rejected carbs and a upgraded ECU. Fast forward to 2002 and we see a third version of that original R1, yet with more improvements. Two of the biggest changes on that bike came in the form of a very clever CV carb slide, which was controlled by the vacuum from the engine, and the Delta Box free frame, which offered fewer welds than the frame on the previous version of the R1, but actually offered 30% more rigidity. We did review a 2002 R1 last year on the channel, so do go check that out if you're interested. Fast forward again to 2004 and Yamaha brought us this. So this is a completely redesigned R1 over the previous version and was the first bike ever in production to reach a 1:1 power to weight ratio. This new version of the R1 features a brand new Delta Box 5 frame, which offers 200% more rigidity than the previous R1. This was achieved by actually tilting the cylinders of the engine forward 40 degrees. This allowed a straight line to be run from the headstock right the way down here to the swing arm pivot. Yamaha has also changed up the appearance of the R1, so we've got a much sharper, more aggressive looking bike with the now iconic twin underseat exhausts. So the engine in this bike was redesigned as well. So we've got sleeveless cylinder blocks, different crankcases to the previous model. Making a claimed 171 brake horsepower, it made this the most powerful R1 of the time. Even by today's standards, that's still a very respectable figure. Other additions include the factory fitted steering damper. The brakes were upgraded to radial mount calipers. They're set on 320mm discs along with a radial mounted master cylinder. The clutch basket was modified to reduce its weight by 5% and makes use of coil springs rather than the old-fashioned diaphragm springs. Clearly this bike isn't in its original colour, so this is a custom paint job inspired by the MotoGP Fortuna race bike. So just before we get this bike out on the road, see what it's all about. If you've been here for a while, you will know that we work very closely with JD Comps. So this bike again is here today courtesy of them. They've been really great to us along the years, giving a lot of really fantastic bikes to play with, to make content with, and the best part is they give you the chance to win the bike that's been featured in the video. If you'd like to get involved, I'll leave the link you need to their website in the description of this video. Please do go and show them some support. Alright, so unfortunately we've timed that really badly and it's just started raining. The weather forecast did say it's supposed to be sunny today. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but we'll have a little go nonetheless. So first impressions really on the R1. Feels much more aggressive than the Fireblade I reviewed a few weeks ago. So that Fireblade was a couple of years newer than this bike, but you seem to sit a lot higher on the R1. Your legs are a lot higher, you're leaning forward a lot more, while the Fireblade just wanted to do everything really well. You get the impression that the R1 just wants to get you from A to B as quick as possible. That is blisteringly quick. Even by today's standards, that is blisteringly fast. Quite typical with the inline-4 that the low end RPM, not a whole lot really happens. It's a little bit flat, a bit docile, which isn't really a bad thing, especially on a bike like this when you've got so much power. Actually not having any of it at a low RPM just makes the bike a little bit easier to live with, especially if you're living in town or you do quite a bit of commuting. But as soon as you're past, didn't quite see where it took off there. I think that was 4,500 RPM. It's like the rocket just ignited and that's it, you're away. But early impressions, very nice. Gearbox is nice and direct, lovely and smooth. The clutch and throttle response both felt a little bit snatchy at the low revs, but as soon as you get moving that just seems to disappear. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier on, our good friends JD Comps are sponsoring this video and they've loaned us this bike for review today. This bike is a competition prize. However, the competition is set to close on Sunday. So as today's the day of recording, today is Wednesday. It seems pretty unlikely the video will be uploaded before the competition's finished. But do still go and check them out. They seem to be doing the new bike every couple of weeks at the moment, so well worth an impromptu visit to the website just to see what they've got on offer. I must say, what I've really enjoyed just lately, I've rode a few of this superbikes from this kind of era, and there's something really nice about the lack of rider aids and technology that you get on the newer breed of superbikes. So the Fireblade is very, very similar. The Benelli, even the Aprilia RSV. I don't know, it's just, I find it quite nostalgic. It's sort of a time when superbikes were just a little bit simpler, and instead of it being a computer that was dictating how much power you can have or what the bike's going to do, instead it's all onto you. You know, there's no rider aids at all on this bike. If I remember correctly, Yamaha did, I think it might have been an SP, R1 SP, that had a slipper clutch and a few of a little sort of optional extras geared a little bit more towards being on the track. But on the road going version, you've got very little really in terms of rider aids or anything really of that standard. You've got a fantastic engine, a fantastic chassis, fantastic gearbox, and the rest really is down to you, which is not a bad thing. A couple of things I do miss, not really a flaw with the bike as such, but we've got no fuel gauge, which was fairly common for bikes of the year. It's even fairly common for bikes nowadays, in fact, but it is a luxury that you miss when you don't have it. And the stock levers that we've got here aren't adjustable, which is a bit of a shame. Again, not a massive issue. A set of aftermarket levers is who's going to sort that out for you, but makes you wonder why Yamaha at the time didn't just do that from the factory. We do have a shift light here, which is a nice addition. A nice big shift light as well. Sometimes, especially on these older superbikes, sometimes there's like a tiny LED that's hidden amongst the cluster or somewhere, or something like this that you can see down here. But you've got a nice big bright LED shift light. It's going to catch your eyes without you even needing to take your eyes off the road. Again, just sort of a flashback to when I was riding the Fireblade the other day. This particular bike is 04, so right now it's 2021. That's knocking on the door, 20-year-old, and you would not think it in the slightest. The performance you've got and just how you feel when you ride the bike, it doesn't feel dated at all. I think it is quite surprising is actually how quiet the bike is, especially at low RPM. I say quiet, lads, until you give it a handful. The thing just screams. But yeah, the lack of rider aids and, more than anything, distractions, it's quite nice. As I said just before, if you jumped on this bike without knowing what you were riding, no chance would you think it was a 20-year-old machine. I've talked about it before on this channel. The performance available for a surprisingly small budget is just staggering at the moment. So this sort of era of superbikes, there's a few we've done for this channel now. There's this R1, there's a Fireblade, there's the O2 R1 that we did, even the RSV, the RSVR. You know, those bikes that are like 15 years old, 15 years plus, the performance is still everything you could want from a road bike. But yeah, just wants to pull your arms out of the sockets. Now, if you're looking at getting back into biking, or even better for like a track day, for a track bike, sorry, £3,000–4,000, get yourself something like this. Whip the fairings off. Oh, and the fun you could have. Holds its position on the road beautifully. Which is exactly what you want at the end of the day. So it does feel a little bit heavier than the Fireblade that I reviewed. Like I say, I'm recalling on that because it was only a few weeks ago I rode that bike, and being it's from that same sort of same era, early 2000s, the Fireblade seemed a little bit more user friendly, like still massively fast and incredible bike. The R1 doesn't quite feel as user friendly. I'm trying to pick my words carefully there, because that's not a negative thing, it's just a different trait, a different feeling that the bike gives you. I say you seem to be, even just the seated position is just much more focused. That's not to say you couldn't commute or tour on a bike like this. For anyone that was into bikes back at the time when this R1 came out, you might remember a guy by the name of Nick Sanders quite famously rode the entirety of planet Earth on a 2005 Yamaha R1. So it's, you know, you certainly could use something like this for touring. There would just probably be better options out there. But yeah, if you wanted something for a fun Sunday blast, or something to take for a track day, or even something to race if you're into club sports or anything like that, look no further. If anybody watching this actually recognises the colour scheme of this bike, I'd be really interested to know what it's based off, and do some research ahead of this review. Obviously, it's a Fortuna MotoGP bike's a race team, but I couldn't actually find anything quite similar to this exact colour scheme. I do remember years ago Aprilia did a very similar colour scheme on, I'm not sure if it was on the RS3R, but it's definitely on the RS 50, the RS 125. It was on the newer shaped bikes before they moved to the one that mirrored the V4, so I'd say that's probably 2006, 2007, somewhere around there. Spain's #1 Fortuna. Quite a similar colour scheme. It wasn't as the neon orange like this one is, it's more of a red and yellow colour scheme, but it's quite similar. But yeah, if anybody can pinpoint exactly what this bike's based off, it'd be really good to know. Well impressed with this bike, honestly. Really impressed. So I think what we'll do as usual now, we'll find somewhere a little bit quieter to pull over, and I'll give you a bit of a verdict and conclusion after having a ride around on this bike for the last hour or so. So I actually found riding this bike today really interesting, partly because the last bike I reviewed for this channel, so that was a few weeks ago, was the 2007 Fireblade. So granted, it was a couple of years newer than this bike, but it's from the same era. I expected them to be quite similar, to be honest, and in some ways they are, but the R1 is a totally different beast to the Fireblade. Although it's still quite an easy bike to ride and get on with, the R1 feels much more focused on just being fast, whereas that Fireblade really felt more like it was trying to be a jack of all trades. As is typical with inline fours, the low end power is very flat, which does, to be honest, work to your advantage if you're in town, if you're stuck in traffic. But once you pass around 4,500 RPM, it just explodes and pulls hard right the way up to the red line. The The engine and the gearbox are silky smooth, and the throttle response is perfect, especially when you're a little bit higher up in the rev range. The bike handles beautifully. It holds its position on the road really well, though at times you do need to manhandle it a little bit. Again, it's just a little bit more of a handful than the Fireblade that I reviewed. Given the absolute bargain prices that you can pick up a bike like this now for, honestly I can see no reason not to recommend one. There wasn't really any major problems with this model R1. In fact, it was oft praised for its build quality, for its reliability. A gentleman by the name of Nick Sanders quite famously rode the entirety of the world in just under 20 days on this exact version of R1. Tackled everything he threw at it and more. That same year, John McGuinness won the Superbike and the Senior Ironman TT again on this very model R1. If those aren't two testimonies to a great bike, I don't know what is. So that concludes my review of this 2004 Yamaha R1. If you enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, please do leave a like down below and consider subscribing to the channel for more videos just like this one. It really does help us out. Thanks again to JD Comps. Don't forget to go and check them out. Take care. I look forward to seeing you all in the next video.